Welcome back to Live with Jane and Jody. Today is August 19th. Can't believe the year is already over, halfway through. Time just flies by. This is ridiculous. But let's dive in. We love these conversations. Thank you all for joining us. For those of you that don't know, my name is Jane Voorhees. I am one of our admissions representatives here to help our candidates get ready for their interview, join the community, anything I can do to help through that enrollment process. I have been at Sonoran University, currently since 2019, back in the admissions role here with Jody. I was also here previously from 2006 until 2013, also supporting the admissions role. This is what it's all about, is helping you guys change the future of our healthcare. Ultimately, what can I do to help you? And that's what I do is, answer your questions, get you through the admissions process and on into enrollment. I work with candidates whose last names are M through Z, and you're going to meet my partner, Jody, who helps the A through L. Thanks for being here.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here. Like Jane said, I have been with Sonoran. I just celebrated my 20th year. So I've been here for a long time. Like Jane said, work with candidates A through L, but we do the same thing. We help candidates get to the stage where we can get you in front of that interview panel and start this journey. And we're always a part of it as well. So welcome. Have a great time. You're going to get some great information and feel free to ask any questions that you'd like throughout the session. That's what we're here for. All right. So I usually share a core value. Core values are beliefs of our institution. So today I picked we do the right thing by being principle driven, guiding our actions through honesty and integrity, through honoring commitments, saying what we do and doing what we say, by accepting responsibility, holding ourselves and others accountable, by following the golden rule, treating others as we would want to be treated. So that's my core value for the month.
Guiding principles. Thank you, Jody. We do the right thing.
Yeah.
I love it. Very, always a good one. Thank you so much. All right, so just to remind everybody, I am recording this session. We do want you to participate, but just be aware that we do post these videos on YouTube for others to go back and listen to and hear this great information. So just so you're fully aware, you're absolutely welcome. Turn on your cameras or use the chat feature. We'll keep an eye on that if you have questions. We understand the awkwardness of Zoom, so just feel free to interrupt or throw a question in the chat, and we'll definitely include you in our conversation today. So keeping that in mind, I'm excited to introduce our guest speaker today, Dr. Deidra Succo. Thank you for joining us. We're happy to have you. Let me tell you guys a little bit about her, and then we're just going to let her take the show. So I had to look on a map to figure out where she was from. From Chanto, Arizona, is way out in the middle of, it seems like absolutely nowhere, almost to the border of Colorado,
Wow.
way up north. It was incredible when I saw it on the map. So I'm a little anxious to hear about her background and how she broke out of that little tiny town and made it all the way to Fort Lewis College in Durango, Colorado. That's where she majored in cellular and molecular biology. And then came on down here to Sonoran University. I'm sure at the time it was SCNM. Graduated in 2023, and we are fortunate that she is still here with us as our residency director, one of our professors in the clinic. It's awesome. So outside of Sonoran University, she also has a lot of fun hobbies, participating in women's soccer league, playing chess, and also dabbling in piano. Such an artist. I love it. Well, Dr. Succo, thank you so much for being with us today. Anything else you'd like to add to that intro?
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for that intro, and thanks for having me today. As far as adding anything to the intro, I think you pretty much summed it up really, really well. And yes, I'm glad you brought up the location of where I grew up. It's a very rural part of Arizona. I will say there is one gas station in the area. Otherwise, towns are about an hour from where I grew up. But it's right at the heart of the Navajo reservation. So I'm Navajo, so I grew up on the reservation.
Very nice. Very nice.
I got the
Oh,
goosebumps. Are you, I
awesome.
want to go into questions later and go into like
Yeah.
your connection with the tribal community and stuff, how that is.
Yeah.
But let's
Yeah.
just dive in
Yeah.
from the start. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Jody.
All right, Dr. Succo. So everybody wants to know, we ask every alumni this same question. Everybody wants to know, how did you become interested in naturopathic medicine? Where did your passion stem from?
Yeah, it was quite the journey. But I like to start when I was very young. I think this was the time where I was immersed in, at the time I didn't know medicine. So I grew up with my grandmother, and she would go out in the fields and she would look for certain herbs, and we would use herbs for medicinal purposes. We would also use herbs to dye our rugs that we would make as well. And so she would teach me the name of the herbs. She would teach me the part of the herb that we would use, and specifically for, the purpose of using that. So one of the common things growing up is, we would get a common cold, and my grandma would go out forage those herbs and teach me along the way while I'm recovering from the common cold. And sure enough, I saw some improvement in majority of my symptoms. And that's where I knew that I wanted to get into medicine. At the time, did not know anything about naturopathic medicine, which I'm sure many of us can relate to. And it wasn't until I continued my journey through undergrad. And at that point, I was at the juncture of deciding, do I want to go more into research, or do I want to go more conventional medicine route? And I'm very fortunate that I had waited on deciding what my next steps are. In doing so, I was able to come across naturopathic medicine, actually, because I was working at the time at a functional medicine clinic. And one day a naturopathic physician walked through the doors, and that's where I first learned about it. And come to find out, there was a naturopathic medical school out in Arizona, and it just at that time felt very natural and right for me to go that route. And automatically I was the values of naturopathic principles, just very much aligned with my own values as well. And so it just seemed very natural for me at the time. And I'm so fortunate, so proud that I went through the program. And I'm very thankful to be here today to share all that information with you all listening on the call today.
Awesome. Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah. So once you found the school in Arizona, did you even look at the other schools? Did you investigate them at all, or did you just focus on SCNM at the time?
Yeah, so I was actually between Sonoran and UNM, out in Portland, Oregon. At the time, I think that there was a lot more financial stability to stay in Arizona, so I didn't have to make the move all the way to Portland, Oregon. And I was familiar with the Phoenix area, so again, it just seemed more in favor for me to go to Sonoran. And I'm glad that you had mentioned that you started back in 2019, because that's when my journey started at Sonora, at the time SDNM in 2019. So I can say I remember both you, Jane, and Jody, just very, very friendly folks. And I think that interaction was probably the selling point for me. That was a part where I was like, I'm a part of a really great community who are so passionate for supporting students in the future naturopathic physicians. And I think that's where I was like, I'm in the right place. I'm glad that I made this decision.
Very nice.
Thank you so
Very
much.
nice. We love what we do. I can tell you. I can tell you. I've had the pleasure working with Jane before she left for a little bit. And then when she came back, we absolutely connect really well. We have the same passion. We want the same thing from each one of our students. So you're
It's so
absolutely
powerful.
correct.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yes, yes. So let's talk a little bit about the program. Was it as hard as you thought it was going to be? Was it harder? Was it, what do you think?
Yeah, so again, I was pretty fortunate. I had a very strong science background.
Okay.
And so the first year of the program is very heavy science, right? We have the biochemistry courses, which can be very difficult, but I did have that background in my undergrad. And so I think the transition for me was a much more easier transition.
Okay.
I will say though, there were some courses. So one of the first courses that you will take in your first year is understanding the theories of traditional Chinese medicine. I felt like that was very not as intuitive. It's very opposite of conventional medical world. So, for example, in I'll talk about an organ in the body, the spleen, right? So, spleen is really helpful for storing blood. It's really helpful for filtering out blood, and that's what we learn in conventional medical school as far as the what the function of the spleen is for. But in traditional Chinese medicine, it's actually very different in that the spleen is seen as more of holding in blood within the vessels. It's responsible for, so anytime that you eat food, drink water, the spleen will turn that into what is called vital qi. And so it's very opposite
Hmm.
of what we learn in conventional medical school as far as like what the spleen does in the human body. So it took a little bit of kind of retraining my thinking. But once you get through the theories of traditional Chinese medicine, that understanding of the different vital organs in the body makes a lot more sense. And once you start practicing it in clinic, it just all comes together. So I felt like that in my first year was probably really challenging for me. But as the program went on, I think the next challenging part about that was actually entering clinic. Because you've devoted the first year and second year of going through your didactic courses, learning the foundations of different sciences, and then you're in clinic where it's a completely different experience, and now you are responsible for interviewing the patient, coming up with treatment plans, administering any procedures in the clinic as well. So it's definitely um, that was definitely the next challenge in the program, but and a very, very excited time. I can tell you that many students in my cohort, including myself, were just eager and excited to get into clinic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What a neat perspective. I have not heard anyone talk about the theories of the Chinese medicine before. So that's really neat to hear from your perspective of, whoa, this is a total conflict of what is supposed to be happening or what I'm supposed to understand there. That's pretty neat. And really great for you to share the clinical aspect. What I hear there is like just now something you have to apply critical thinking skills. You have to take all of that and actually show what you've learned.
Yeah, yeah, it's almost as if this is where a lot of the clinical making decisions happen, right? So it's turning that information into how am I going to help this patient that's sitting in front of me? And what is the standard of care of this particular condition the patient is coming in with? And so it's really a time for you to be the student doctor and figure those things out. And so, we've come across some very complex patients, but in doing so in terms of working up for that patient, you learn so much about that. And it's a really great time for you to grow as a future doc as well.
Right. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about the clinical experience, even the residency type of experience
Right.
as we go through some of these questions. So, yeah, I lost my track of where we were at some of our questions. Because I feel like I want to go into that already as you're starting talking about the clinical experience and stuff. Like I want the guests on the call here, come visit and be student for a day. Shadow in the clinic so you can see what that learning experience is like as they go back in the classroom and there's 12 students there. How does that work? Once you've interviewed that patient and you go back to the clinic room or your classroom, you and your classmates, how do you break it down?
Yeah, so the great thing
Mm.
about our clinic is it's a teaching medical clinic. So it's set up exactly in that manner to support students in their own learning. And so going back to the classroom, right? In that classroom, you have two physicians. You have the supervising physician, as we call your attending, and then you have a resident. So that resident is also a physician who's supporting the attending, but supporting the shift at large. And so when going back to the classroom, you essentially, you, the student, present to the classroom, which includes other students on that rotation as far as, this is what the patient is coming in for. These are the questions that I asked. And out of these questions, this is the differential that we say, the diagnosis of the patient we're considering. Um, and I want to do X, Y, and Z for this patient, whether it's ordering labs, making a referral, ordering imaging, so things of that. So a lot of the clinical decision happens on that rotation. And these are decisions that you discuss with your attending and or resident. And so you come up with a plan together.
Hmm.
Love it.
Okay.
Because you're, as a patient, you have 10 minds back there thinking about your healthcare and, putting energy into your well-being and stuff. So I just think it's a very powerful and wonderful experience for our patients. They're long shifts. I do know that when
Yeah.
you're a patient, it takes a while.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think one other additional thing I'll add to that too is, not only do you would have shifts at the medical center, but we have multiple community shifts as well. In fact, I'm actually the site director at one of our community medicine clinics called Hamilton Elementary. So we serve both pediatric patients, adult geriatric patients at the community health clinic as well, where we provide free healthcare to the patients. So patients don't pay for the visit. We pay for their prescriptions. We pay for their labs. So it's such a rewarding shift to be a part of. And you'll learn this pretty quickly in that Sonoran is really big with serving their community. And so this is one way that we get to give back to our community.
You are a busy lady. And I did not realize that you were also at Hamilton. Yeah, I
Yeah.
see you on
Uh-huh.
campus Tuesdays and you're over there. My goodness.
Yeah,
So
it's a
let's
very
back
Wow.
up.
exciting
Yeah,
time.
yeah, girl. Yeah.
Wow.
Let's
Wow.
back up a little bit back to how you got here. So while you were a student, obviously you talked about initially the first years of the sciences and then going into clinical as that critical thinking comes out. What about outside of school? Did you have a life outside of school, or was this all you could think about?
Yeah, so this is actually where the women's soccer league comes into play. So there were days where, I found myself just being in the library all the time. And there were days where I just wanted to decompress and do something fun and not so much using my hands. So I figured I go into soccer where I can use my feet. And so ended up finding a women's soccer league, and that was such a great. I'm glad that I made that decision because it was a good time for me to kind of decompress, get out and get some physical activity, get some sun, and go and play a game that I've actually been playing for some time. I played soccer in high school. I played a little bit in college as well, so it was a good way to return back to that, and just have another community outside of school. And chat with those folks and build up a really good friendly relationship with folks who also enjoy playing soccer. So it was a needed thing actually.
Balance is good.
Wow. 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 Very nice. Very nice. So, would you do it all over again? And if you would, what would you do differently?
Yeah, surprisingly, I get asked this question quite a bit.
Really?
And I don't think my response changes because the program is very demanding. It can be quite a bit as you progress over the years that you're here. And honestly, I think one deciding factor that leads me to answer, would I want to redo the entire program? I would say no. Because I do not want to be taking another test ever again. I think that's the deciding factor for me is I don't want to sit for another exam. Although when you do graduate from the program, you'll be sitting for your licensing exam, and I tell students this all the time, that'll be the last exam that you'll ever have to take for the rest of your life, which is actually a really nice feeling. But, I do want to answer the other question as well. If I were to redo the entire program, what would I do differently? I think what I would do differently is I think I would join more groups in terms of study groups.
Okay.
I'm usually, going through undergrad, I was a solo studier. I would just kind of study on my own, maybe reach out to a few people from time to time, but I think you can learn so much in a group setting. And I learned this when I was studying for my licensing exams, is that what I did in my group is, I was very proficient on a certain topic and I would teach the group that I was with on that topic. And then there was another group member who was proficient in a different topic, and they would teach us that. So it took a little bit more effort out of my end to try to learn different topics all at one time. And so I think that I would branch out a little bit more and engage more in study groups, because there's a lot that you can learn from others as well. And that can certainly be helpful along the way as well.
Great advice. Great advice. What's, I think, a little bit of the secret, or we're not even touching on, is that you went through the program during COVID.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't too easy either. Right?
Exactly.
No wonder you want to take any more tests.
Yeah. Yeah, that would definitely was an adjustment, right? In that we were so my cohort was a very close group. And so, you know, we were used to going on campus, going to lectures together, you know, maybe having some sort of social activity outside. And so, you know, it almost seemed like overnight where we went online and having the social distancing and things like that. And so that definitely was a change in the experience. But again, we returned eventually. So by the time I got into clinic, that's when we were back in person. And I'm very fortunate that we were able to get back in person during clinic. And so definitely an adjustment for sure.
Right. Now, and then once you graduated, you were applying for a residency position yourself, year one? All right. You think, obviously you're now the director as well. Tell us a little bit about why that's an important step.
Yeah. So residency, I think, and I'll let you in on this, in that I initially wasn't considering residency when I was a student. And it wasn't until my final year in medical school is when I was like, you know what, I think residency would be helpful. One, because it provides a very structured mentorship for new docs. It's a time where you still get supervision from other experienced physician, and you're learning alongside that as well. And I found that very, very appealing. And also I knew that that was going to help me grow as a physician, both, you know, building my clinical skill set, my knowledge, my confidence as well. And I think residencies, and I truly believe that residencies are going to be so helpful in really helping students grow as well once they graduate from here. So I tell students, consider doing residency. And if you have questions, reach out to me directly, and I'm happy to talk to you about that experience. But yeah, so I think there might be another question about other residencies that I applied to as well.
Yeah, go ahead. Share with us that, like, right at graduation, did you only apply here, or were you applying across the country?
Yeah, so at that point when I was applying for residency, I wanted to find a residency that emphasized community, right? So community clinics, as I shared earlier, Sonoran offers a variety of community clinics. And I've always been looking for residencies that also share that same passion in supporting their communities. And so I ended up applying to Sonoran. I applied to the residency out at NUNM in Portland, Oregon. And then I also applied to a residency out in Hawaii. Those were the three residencies that I applied to. And another important thing to also keep in mind when applying for residencies, and I do wish that this is something that I knew ahead of time, is licensure for the different states. Licensure requirements is different in Arizona versus Oregon versus Hawaii. So knowing that ahead of time can be really helpful when you're applying for residencies. More so in terms of what you have to take when you're taking your licensing exams. And I can talk a little bit more about that as well.
Well, in general, licensure from state to state, we're realizing, or scope of practice is a little bit different. I know here in Arizona, you already touched on traditional Chinese medicine. I don't know if the other students from the other schools, do they take those exams as well? Is that what you're referring to? Minor surgery? There's a couple key elements that we do here. Please elaborate. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll start with Arizona, and not that I'm going to talk about all states, but I'll talk about a handful just for example here. So for Arizona, it is required that you take minor surgery, that you take the acupuncture elective exams, in addition to the core exam, so NPLEX 2, in order to be licensed in Arizona. Other elective exams that are offered during that time is pharmacology and the periental elective exam, which is the IB. Those are optional for Arizona. Versus when you are applying to, say, for example, in Portland, Oregon, you are required to take pharmacology and you are required to take minor surgery. However, you're not required to take acupuncture. So that's also another really important thing to know if you are applying to residencies outside of Arizona, knowing that you have to consider that when you're taking your licensing exams. Interesting thing about Hawaii is you're not required to take any of the elective exams. However, you can take core, so NPLEX Part 2 take that, and then you can go ahead and apply to a residency out in Hawaii. The caveat to that is you can't practice acupuncture in Hawaii. You actually have to apply for a licensed acupuncturist license in order to practice acupuncture in Hawaii. You can't just use your medical license. So those are just some important things to note as well. And for example, in Utah as well, they do require that you complete a full year of residency before you can apply for licensure in Utah as well. So those are just some things to note when you're considering practicing in different states.
Tips. Yeah. I'm curious then, with those notes, does Debbie Taylor's office kind of help you dive in if I'm specifically, I want to go to Idaho and find out their licensure, their requirements and stuff. Is that the office? Do you think that's best, or also the residency director? Who's the best person to connect with as a student when you're looking into those things?
Yeah, so with regard to residencies, I'm more than happy to be the point of contact for that, at least directing where students can go to look more into that. Each state that is licensed has a medical board for naturopathic physicians, and so that would be the website that you would go to and see what the legal laws and things like that you'll find on the website. So as far as like what is required in order to apply for a license in that state. But I'm always a helpful resource when it comes to residencies. And I do work with Debbie Taylor. We've partnered on different projects as well, but she's also great when it comes to, those initial questions, and she'll likely direct you my way with regard to residency. So
Mhm.
we've been working pretty well recently as well.
Very good.
Questions so far from the audience? No? You can
Mhm.
unmute yourself if you'd like, or you could put it in the chat if you'd like. I don't want to forget about you
Please
guys.
join us. Exactly, Jody. Ladies and gentlemen, this chat is for you. Any questions that come to mind, drop them in the chat or feel
Yeah,
free to unmute and
yeah.
jump into the conversation anytime. We just bounce around. Let's see
There
it
we
work.
go.
We just had to remind them. Go ahead, Jody.
Okay, hold on. Yeah. All right. Thank you for sharing with us today. I was wondering, why did you choose to go the naturopathic route as opposed to conventional medicine?
Yeah, great question. So I would say my answer to that is the naturopathic principles were very much aligned with my own principles, in that. So you'll learn this once you go through the program. It's actually instilled in you very early on, and it's something you don't forget. But there are core values, and one of them that really stood out to me was, treat the whole person, treat the underlying cause. Doctor as teacher. I feel that those values, especially treat the whole person, really resonated with me, and more so from my cultural values and principles. And that, when it comes to treatments that I guess therapies that we do back on my homeland, there's a lot of, we treat the mental health piece, right, as well as the physical person as well. So treating the whole person really resonated with me, and I find that in naturopathic medicine, that is practiced all the way and throughout. And I think that was the main deciding factor for me, is that that was what resonated with me, and I just felt like it was very natural for me to go in that direction.
Good, very good. We have another question regarding study groups. Do you have tips on how to find good ones as opposed to ones that are non-value added? Trial and error.
Yeah, so so I think I was a person that kind of trialed different study groups. So, I got invited out to a little study group, and if I felt that we were making that time to be most efficient for all of us, there was that mutual benefit for us to actually be together and study together. That was the group that I typically went for. But if there was a group where I felt like we weren't getting anything done, it was more of a socializing setting, then I was like, maybe this is not the right group for me. But yet you want to make sure that you find the group that best works for yourself. I think one of the helpful things too, when I found the group that I worked well with, is we did preparation. So we prepared beforehand before we got together. So by the time we got together during our study groups, it was all, we were ready to go. We were ready to teach each other. We were ready to sit down and actually learn from each other as well. So we did the preparation before getting the group together.
Nice. Good to know. All right, we have a couple more coming in. Also, what was the environment like going to school? Mostly a big city environment.
Sorry, Jody, can you repeat that?
Oh, sure. What was the environment like going to school? Mostly a big city environment.
Yeah. So the environment of going to school, it definitely was a transition for me, I will say. So when I went to undergrad, it was out in a place called Durango, Colorado. The college, it's a liberal arts college, no more than 4,000 students. So it's a very, very tiny college, and it's a very tiny town. And so having to make that transition to going and living in a much more larger city was a transition. So I think one of the things that I had to, learning the streets and things of that, um, trying to figure out living as well. I certainly didn't want to live too far from the school, more so because we had early 8 a.m. classes, and then I didn't want to drive in traffic. You'll learn here when you move here, the traffic is not the greatest. So living as close as you can to the school can be very helpful. And I think the other thing about cities that they offer a lot of great recreational activities too, especially when the weather is great. You get to access different areas that you can hike at, different parks that you can run at. And there's a lot of indoor activities as well. And so there's a lot of like running groups, dancing groups, things like that too. So those are just some really good options that you can take advantage of as more of downtime outside of school.
Exactly. Lots to do.
Ivana raised her hand.
All
Let's
right.
let her chime in. Go ahead, Ivana.
Hi, thank you. I'm Ivana, and I am intrigued about your experience, Dr. Succo. I guess with the people that you went to school with. A little bit about me is I have mixed race, mixed ancestry, but I come from a lineage of healers, and I was curious if you, I guess, yeah, could maybe speak to any of that, and like if you had any experience of um similarity or difference with the people in your cohort. And the other thing I was curious about is where you were talking about the difference between Arizona and Oregon and Hawaii, about how there were some requirements before getting to practice, and I didn't know if you said that was residency that needed to be required. But yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. Great question. So when coming to the school, I think what you'll learn pretty quickly is there's a diverse cohort of students. Everyone comes from a different cultural background, and I think it's such a great experience because you get to learn where everybody is coming from. And, one of the things I was thinking about when I started here is I wonder if I would find another Native American at the school. And I unfortunately was not able to during my time here. But I was able to connect with others who are partners of those who are Native American. And so I think there was a little bit of that connection and a little bit of more of understanding of those cultural backgrounds. But I also thought it was a great opportunity for me to share with others, where my upbringing was and, what my values and beliefs are. And so it was good to share that and learn that with others in my cohort, and how I think everyone was just very close as well. And again, you're going to be spending 4 years with with the students in your cohort, and you really build a really tight bond with them. In fact, I'm still friends with many of them since we've graduated, and a lot of us have moved across the country, and we're still very close because you spend 4 years with them and you learn and you grow with them as well. And I'm glad you mentioned lineage of healers, and I also come from that as well. In fact, my grandmother was the medicine woman in my community, and so that's I guess that's where we also connect on that level as well. And again, you will find your group here. As I mentioned, it's a great community, whether you make close friends with the students in your cohort or just any, like Jane and Jody are also supportive as well. Eventually, you'll probably talk to Debbie Taylor, who's in career services, and now you know me as well. So I'm also in supportive of you all as well. As far as the licensure of the different states, the only one that I know of so far that does require you complete 1 year of residency is actually Utah. Utah right now is the only state that does require you complete 1 year of residency. Otherwise, all other states don't require that.
That is correct.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time and your response.
You're welcome.
All right, let's see. Okay, so Sophia asked, hi there. I am starting at Sonoran in the fall and am very interested in working at the community clinics. Are you able to choose which clinic sites you have rotations at, or are they randomly assigned? Good question.
Yeah, so shifts are actually going to be randomly assigned. However, you also are able to submit a little request of like, hey, I'm really wanting to get on this rotation. Could I be considered for this rotation? But they are randomly assigned. The other thing to add about that too, and I'm glad you brought up the question about interest in community clinics. We do offer honors tracks here. So honors tracks that are specific to providing pediatrics. We have honor tracks for community medicine. We also have honor tracks for regenerative medicine. So I actually was as a former student, I was on the community medicine honors track. And so a lot of my rotations were based out at the community clinics. And so those of you that do go through the honors track, you get priority in terms of shifts that are focused on community medicine if you choose that route. If you choose pediatrics, you're going to be on rotations that are pediatric focused. And really the point of those honors track is to really build your clinical experience in those areas of fields that you're interested in. So Sophia, my recommendation is if you are interested in community clinics, I would definitely consider the community medicine honors track.
I didn't even realize that you had done that. So Jody, that's a note we need to add in the future questions of, did you do an honors track? I didn't even think to ask
one
that.
or two here and there.
Yeah, surprise, yeah, new ideas and stuff. Great advice, great information.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Hi, my name is Leanne, and I am hoping to start at Sonoran University in the spring. What is something that you would like for incoming students to understand about the program/journey, as well as working in clinics as a naturopathic physician before starting the program?
Yeah, that is a great question. I will say, I know that I mentioned that I came in with a science background. So my transition into the program was a little bit more manageable than most students in my cohort who didn't have a science background. Um, so what I would say is, first of all, I would say be kind to yourself. I think that there are going to be moments in the program where you felt like, oh, I didn't study as well, or I could have studied more, maybe I could have done better on this test. But in the long run, you're putting in the time and effort now, early in the program to make you successful when you get into clinic, and then to make you a more confident, competent doc when you're out in practice as well. So putting in that time and effort now is going to really pay off in the end. But again, be very kind to yourself. And one thing that you'll hear likely your week one of orientation is don't forget your why. And I feel like that's something I really remembered when I started the program is, and I heard that a few times, is don't forget your why. Why did you choose to go into this profession? And the closer you stay to that, I think you will have that dedication and that motivation to continue through the program, get through the program, and then go out and practice as a naturopathic physician. And I still review that why for me. And I guess I can share that now. And that why for me eventually is to provide healthcare to folks out on the who are still living on the reservation. So trying to bridge that access of care and providing free healthcare, naturopathic healthcare. And so eventually would love to open up a mobile clinic to serve the larger area of the reservations. And so again, that was my why. And I think that's something that I still hold near and dearly to me. And that's something that eventually I'm going to get to. As of now, I don't feel that my journey here at Sonoran is quite done yet. And I think I want to continue here a little longer before I continue that eventually.
Well, that's where we started today was what is your connection still with
Yeah.
your community? And do you just go back and visit your grandma? Like, do you go back and visit the community every once in a while? And do you get time? Now you have me super curious. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. So, so I was raised very traditionally. And so, every so often throughout the year, I do go home for ceremonies that we do practice. And so I still had plenty of time to do that, especially after completing my 2 years of residency at the school. I have a lot more time on my hands to do that. So, very much still involved with that. And I guess I forgot to add this to I guess my hobbies too. And it's something that I haven't been doing recently, but it's something I did do a lot more before I joined the program, and that was weaving rugs. So I mentioned earlier, my grandma would show me the different types of herbs that produce a certain dye color, so red, orange, things like that, and how to mix those herbs and how to dye the wool that we would use. So we have sheep at home, and what we would do is we would go and shear the sheep. So we would take that wool from the sheep and go and dye the wool with the herbs that we have, and that's something that I have my own little loom and something that I would go and weave as well, and it's something that I haven't done in quite some time. But it's certainly something that I do want to revisit. So I'm glad that you brought this up, and it's something that I need to return to as well.
Maintain the
How
roots.
awesome.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's so
How
cool.
awesome.
I would
That's
imagine that's almost
impressive.
meditative too. I'm imagining, like you said, the loom and just the
Yeah,
repeat, the process and all. So again,
ab-
balance, let your mind go. That's so neat. Yeah.
absolutely.
Wow. Interesting.
Don't see any other
Love
question.
it.
Let's go back to our list. What's next,
Yeah,
Jody?
I
I've
know.
lost track.
I know. I know. I did want to, I may be going out of order here, but talking about residency, is the residency program competitive when you go
Mm.
to apply to a residency? Yes. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so residency program is competitive, largely due to we have more graduates than we have residency sites available. Unfortunately, we don't have a residency for everyone who graduates, unfortunately. Um, And that's the piece that I have actually been working on in my current position as a residency director, is creating new affiliate residency sites for our students. So over the last few, I would say maybe the last 8 months, I think I've created 10 new sites that are going to be active for next cycle. So that gives more residency sites for students to apply to within the state of Arizona. And so I think in that regard, it can be competitive because there are a lot of students who are applying for residencies. And then it gets more competitive when you are applying to more specialty focused clinics. So things like clinics that only do integrative oncology, those residencies are very competitive as well. Or residencies that offer more of like pediatric focused care as well. Those can be very competitive as well.
But there are opportunities
I've heard they
nationwide,
are.
international. Like, how many opportunities are there, would you say, annually?
Yeah, so I can probably share the number because we just got through our last cycle. I believe in total, we had about, oh my gosh, I think it was about 60 residency sites that were taking on students. And I think we had way more than that in terms of applicants. I would say triple that number. So it's a very competitive time to apply for residencies, but it's also a time where there are other options as well. There are clinics that know that you are a new grad. They're willing to take you on in the practice and still offer you that mentoring and that guidance. But what I will say, what makes residency very unique is that it does offer structured mentorship. It does provide you not only clinical practice, but within residencies, you also are required to do scholarly activities. So that can include things like doing a case presentation about a particular patient condition, or even doing research on the side as well. So it's a very comprehensive residency experience, and you are guaranteed that supervision and that mentoring, that one-on-one mentoring for that full year during your residency.
Oh, interesting.
Now, I think I look at some of the faces that are here joining us today, and they are going to graduate in, let's say, 4 years. So what could they do to connect with a clinic in their hometown today, so that when they're graduating, there might be a residency and they can actually move home if they thought of, like, do you have any tips on thinking that far ahead?
Yeah, I think that's a great that I'm glad you brought that up too. So one of the things that I find very helpful for getting into a residency is establishing that relationship early on. So as soon as you're in clinic and you're thinking about moving back to your hometown, contact one of the offices or the naturopathic practices out in that area and see if they're interested. They might have already have an established residency, or if they are considering of taking on a residency, what the next process in that is actually contacting a sponsoring school. So Sonoran and all the naturopathic medical schools are sponsoring schools, and we can make that initial step towards having that site become affiliated with a school and creating a residency site. So that's an option as well. Another thing you can do, again, establishing that relationship at a clinic and doing some shadowing there, getting to know the docs there. You increase your chances of getting accepted into that residency at that clinic by shadowing early on and establishing that as well. So those are some really helpful things you can do very early on to get a residency. And of course, if you have any questions about, other sites in a different state. So for example, if you are considering a residency in California, one of the things you can do is contact the residency director at the school out in California. Or if you're considering Portland, reach out to that school residency director there as well. And that'll be a really good helpful point for you.
Okay. Good, good. Well, you know what? I apologize. We have a few notes in the chat. Hi, thank you so much for sharing with us today. I would love to hear your thoughts as far as trying to help underserved and socioeconomically challenged communities. And this is probably a bit multifaceted. What about challenges that come with changing diet, implementing exercise, and psychology of getting these communities to adapt new habits, especially in the face of financial as well as psychological challenges such as depression? Do you have any thoughts as to how we can better reach them? Thank you.
Yeah, so this is a question that I continually ask myself, especially in communities that are rural, that don't have access to hospitals that are likely an hour away. And so how can we better provide those services to those who do live in rural areas? And, I can use my hometown as an example. Earlier I mentioned there's a one gas station there, and so not a great place to get nutrient dense foods right at a gas station. So, there's a lot of food deserts where there's just not available nutrient dense foods within the area. So one of the things that could consider is community gardens. So, supporting those initiatives can help bring more nutrients to those folks who do live in rural areas. And again, it is, like you mentioned, multifaceted. There are so many barriers and access barriers to care, if you will. As far as like changing diet and things of that goes, I think one of the considerations is trying to preserve cultural values and cultural food. So one of the things that you'll see in the community clinics is we do work with a lot of Spanish-speaking patients, and so it's difficult to say like, hey, I want you to take out this food when it could be a part of their cultural diet. So we don't want to adjust that or avoid it or limit it. And instead, we try to figure out alternatives. The other thing that we can also consider, especially with being out here in Phoenix, is food banks, right? So some food banks will offer some really, really great vegetables and fruits at a very low price. So for example, there's a Produce on Wheels that I often will refer patients to, where they can get 70 pounds worth of vegetables and fruits for, I believe it's $15. And they can get that on a weekly basis. And so trying to find those resources for patients, because they are out there. It's just a matter of finding them and sending and referring the patients there. As far as the psychological challenges, that is also another big barrier to care as well. And in my hometown, there's a lot of mental health issues as well, unfortunately. And so one of the things that I have considered down the road is trying to incorporate more of the mental health practices that we have in our traditional values and culture. So, for example, one of the things that I've considered is historically what we would do in the morning is we would wake up in the morning, greet the sun, send out a prayer, and it's a way to start the day off as far as that mental preparedness, and really making that mind-body connection, as I think we've really gone pretty far from that. And so having to revisit those core values can be really helpful in supporting those underserved populations. But again, those are just some examples. I know we can continue this conversation a lot longer, but I think this is a good time to start thinking about answers to those questions, especially where you're thinking on practicing.
Thank you for sharing. All right, we do have another from Aubrey. Ooh, and some more coming in. This is great, guys. Now that we're down to 7 minutes, no rush. When do you need to start thinking about applying for residencies, honing in on what you want to specialize in, especially now where the program is 6 months shorter? Good call out, Aubrey.
Yeah. So what I would say is get through your sciences, get through your didactic courses, focus on that. And I think once you have entered clinic, that is where I would start considering. Start thinking about practices that you can contact in terms of, can I shadow here? Because I can tell you that when I entered clinic, I had no idea what I wanted to do as far as, do I want to work with only pediatric patients? Do I want to do more of a family medicine type of practice? Do I want to do oncology focus? So there was so many things that I was not quite sure at that point what I wanted to do. And so getting out and shadowing different practices can be very helpful as far as like, this is what I want to do. This is not what I want to do. So get your feet on the ground pretty quickly in terms of that when you enter clinic. And I think that's also a good time to start considering residencies. If you know right now where you want to practice, so say like you're coming from, not sure where many of you are coming from, but if you're out of state and you want to move back to that state and you want to practice there, start thinking now what that will look like by the time you get into clinics. So you kind of already thought about that. Start thinking about clinics that you can probably partner with in that state that you're at, or you want to start a residency there. Those are things that you can start thinking about now.
Oh, okay, we still have, now they're just rolling in. Here we go. I have a question in regard to financial aid. I understand there have been some recent changes regarding federal student loans for naturopathic medicine programs. I was wondering how these changes would look like for the student entering in 2027. What do the borrowing limits look like, and what are 2027 students eligible for? Also, how have current students adjusted to those changes? Good questions, you guys.
Yeah, yeah. And I will say largely I would refer that question to our financial aid officer, who can probably give you the more specifics on the number and the borrowing limits and things of that too. But as I believe Aubrey mentioned earlier, the program is shortened by 6 months. And the purpose of that is to ensure that our students can graduate and not exceed the borrowing limits of student loans. And so that's one thing that we have done on our end to redesign the whole curriculum to ensure that you are able to complete the program. But what I would say as far as like specific numbers and things of that, I think that would be a question for our financial aid office. I believe Anna would be your go-to person for that.
Perfect, perfect. And definitely email us. Jody can get you in touch with that department directly as well, for sure. Sophia said, thank you so much. I really appreciate your perspective. I love the cultural component you mentioned. Thank you. Ivana also got another question. How can students who come from rural and underserved populations stay well in a program that is so demanding? Does Sonoran offer resources for students or have any food pantries?
Yeah, great question. So I think it's also so what I ended up finding myself doing is finding a community that felt like home to me. Like I said, when I came here at Sonoran, there was just a lot of friendly faces. Everybody was so warm, welcoming, absolutely loved it. And I'm so glad that I chose this school. But one thing I found a little challenging was finding somebody that I could connect with in terms of my cultural background. But there are a lot of communities out in the Phoenix area that I was able to go to find that connection. I think the other thing that I also did was stayed in contact with family, friends that I grew up with as well. And so keeping those connections was really important to me. And continuing to practice my own cultural beliefs and values as well. That is something I hold near and dear to my heart as well. As far as Sonoran offering resources for students, yes. So Sonoran offers a lot of great resources and food pantries. There's usually an email that gets sent out when Sonoran is offering those resources for students. And again, Sonoran is very, very much involved in terms of supporting students and is very, very much interested in your well-being. And so much of that is offered through the school as well.
As a student, as a staff member, we have access to this amazing clinic. So I believe students get 2 free appointments per year at a minimum. So there's, you have online through My Sonoran, you'll find virtual counseling is available. You have mental health counseling available 24/7. You have access to other online healthcare. If they're just quick call-in or things like that. She's absolutely right. We try to find the resources that are going to be best to support you through this journey. And we listen to our students. I think a lot of this has come about because you've asked for it, because there's been a demand, there's a need. So yeah, what can we do to put it in place to make sure you have it? So really good stuff. All right, looks like we have one more. How many hours a week would you say is necessary for classes and study? Would I be able to maintain a full-time job? Good question.
Definitely a great question. So I think it would depend on the type of studier you are, in terms of how many hours you need to ensure that you understand the material and that you're able to apply what you've learned. That number of hours of studying will certainly depend on the type of study person you are. But I would say I did my best to not study on weekends, but there were some times where I had to study on a weekend. I would say, ooh, and you guys, I was in school a long time ago, it feels like. But I think in terms of study, I was probably spending about anywhere from maybe 10, 15 hours, but it depended on the quarter itself. There were some quarters where it just felt like there were so many more classes, versus other quarters where it didn't feel that way. So that those hours can vary across the board. As far as maintaining a full-time job, I would say that would be challenging, given the amount of hours that you would be studying in the program itself. I don't recommend. I know that I have heard of students who've kept their full-time job while in the program as well. I think the part where that gets tricky is when you enter clinic, where you have assigned rotations in the clinic as well. So it might be a little challenging down the road, but it's doable. I've seen students maintain a full-time job.
Final words of advice. I'm so grateful, guys. We are 1 minute over, but thank you so much for your amazing time. Any last words of advice? What do you recommend?
Yeah, my last word of advice. I think I said this before. Be kind to yourself, you guys. It's going to be a very tough program, very tough journey, but all of that is going to pay off. And once you graduate practicing physician, you get out to do what you want to do, which in terms of, helping patients, supporting patients, treating patients. So don't give up on yourself and know that there's always a lot of support here at Sonoran, really on many levels. So use those support resources, and we are here to guide you along the way and to support you along the way. So thank you everybody for having me. I appreciate you very much.
Thank you,
Dr.
Dr.
Succo.
Succo. Such a great
Thank
conversation.
you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great week.
Thanks, guys. Thank
Bye,
you.
sweetie.
Bye.
Thank you.